Tigray External Affairs Office issues a response to UN High Commissioner's statement on gross violations of human rights in Ethiopia and says it was confused by the failure of High Commissioner to discuss the near complete destruction of schools and health facilities in Tigray. A study by the Bureau of Education reveals that more than 2,000 students and teachers have been killed since the start of the conflict in 2020. Hello and welcome to our viewers watching us live through television screens and our online social media platforms. I'm Mary Nimana, will be reading the news for you today. Stay tuned. The Tigray External Affairs Office issued a statement on Thursday in response to Michelle Bachelet's statement on 49th session of the UN Human Rights Council. While the statement expressed gratitude to Higher Commission for highlighting atrocities committed against the people of Tigray, it asked more to be done on the part of UN to ensure unfettered humanitarian access into Tigray. Salome Tigray has more.
Tigray External Affairs Office issued a statement on Thursday in response to Michelle Bachelet, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights statement at the 49th session of the UN Human Rights Council. The statement expressed gratitude to the High Commissioner for highlighting atrocities committed against the people of Tigray. However, the statement resented the Higher Commissioner's claims that Tigrayan forces had taken part in the destruction of health facilities and schools in the Amhara and Afar regions as being groundless. The office said it was confused by the failure of the Higher Commissioner to discuss the near-complete destruction of schools and health facilities in Tigray and the depletion of life-saving medical supplies and closing down of schools for over 2 years. The statement emphasized that of the near 24,000 trucks that were needed to address the humanitarian needs on the ground since July of 2021, only 6% had been allowed to entry, and said it would be wrong to consider the fighting in Abala, which had taken place for a small duration of time at the start of 2022, as the primary cause of the blockade. The statement said that medical supplies that have entered Tigray through 8 flights are far from the demand on the ground, with just 210 metric tons entering the region in the past few weeks, translating to no more than 5 trucks. The statement also indicated that the High Commissioner praising Abiy Ahmed for the results of the joint investigation by the OHCHR and Ethiopian Human Rights Commission signaled impartiality on the part of the Higher Commissioner. Lastly, the office called on the international community to help allow unfettered humanitarian aid to Tigray and help find a peaceful resolution to the conflict and continue to pay attention to Tigrayans whose lives are on the brink.
A report by the Bureau of Education on the status of Tigray's education system has revealed that over 2,000 students and teachers have been killed since the start of the conflict in 2020. The report has revealed that much of Tigray's educational facilities have been destroyed by allied Ethiopian and Eritrean forces, including one of its prominent teaching colleges in Abiy Adi. Sarah Kalali has more.
In a statement issued on Thursday, the Bureau of Education has unveiled a report on the status of the education system in Tigray. Head for the Bureau, Dr. Shishai Amara, said the report found that over 2,146 students and faculty members have been killed since the start of the conflict. The research does not cover Western Tigray and some parts of Northwestern Tigray that was still under the control of the hostile Ethiopian and Eritrean forces.
The lives lost from the educational society of Tigray: 1,911 students, 235 teachers and other staff members, including the academic leadership. Totally, 2,146 members of the educational society lost their lives during the aggression period, out of which 1,798 are female and 348 are male. This is a mere figure depending on the data we had till September 2021. Even before and after, we could have life casualties. We may have life casualties in different areas that we couldn't access and we couldn't get any information about them.
According to the head of the Bureau, primary and secondary schools across the state were the targets of deliberate and systematical destruction by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces in addition to 2 colleges.
Among their genocidal targets, education and educational infrastructure were the top focuses of these invading and fascist forces. This is not a simple accusation or allegation on them. They themselves spilled the beans on how they objectively planned and destroyed Tigrayan infrastructure, and Ababao Tadessa's speech was exemplary for this. One of the military commanders of the Ethiopian regime. They also targeted human and historical educational capacities of Tigray. They are well aware of damaging education as best instrument to eliminate people in both short and long term. The direct damage on materials and facilities. Classrooms, if we see classrooms, 88.7% is damaged. 88.27. Administration buildings, 31.65%. And here I want to declare that Abiy Adi Teachers College is 100% damaged.
Shishai said that while the government had commenced primary education in the hopes of salvaging the impacts of the damage on the education system, just 20% of students had managed to enroll, a figure that has continued to drop.
We had enrollment of 85.45% in 2020. Now, by the attempt we tried to enroll grade 1 to 6 students, focusing on the children, it dropped down to 20.8%. Even this 20.8% is getting down and down. Might be after some time, we may even have zero enrollment because students are rolling out because of the siege, because of the hunger, the famine, continuing. And on top of that, the continued drone attacks is returning students from the doors of the schools.
Lastly, the head called on UN agencies, international and local NGOs, and civic societies to join hands to mobilize different resources, address emergency demands, and long-term rehabilitation endeavors.
Internally displaced people are one among the most vulnerable members of the community. The 8-month-long siege on Tigray that has hindered the delivery of much-needed aid into the region has depleted food stocks and other necessary items such as shelters. But IDPs in Ma'ala say that they had no option but to leave their homes where Ethiopian forces had threatened to commit further violence. Aragaw Garumkail has more.
For the past 8 months, the Ethiopian government has been hindering the delivery of basics such as food aid and medical supplies from reaching Tigray. One of the most highly affected communities have been IDPs, who have not only lost their homes and community but are now finding it difficult to access basics such as food aid and medical supplies. This is the Samatat Primary School in Mekelle that has been sheltering IDPs from over a year now. Kafla Jesus Mesfen is an IDP displaced from Kafta Homera in the district of Adaba in western Tigray. He says all his belongings were looted while he was arbitrarily detained by the Ethiopian forces.
They detained us in a storage facility for grain. They took us from St. Talhaimanot while we were praying. They released us, but many of us were left empty-handed. All our belongings were looted while we were in the detention campus. They loaded all the grain in the storage facility and took it. We didn't say anything. They there released elders like me, but they keep the young in prisons. There were 7 members of one family detained with us. So many atrocities took place in the detention camps. The soldiers detained and tortured many.
Mami Taklaimanut is just one of the 1.2 million persons to be displaced from western Tigray, where the Ethiopian forces led by Amhara militia have taken on an ethnic cleansing campaign to rid the area of its majority Tigrayan population. She says Amhara forces looted her belongings before they forcibly displaced her and her children.
We had to leave. They wouldn't stop torturing us. As soon as we left, they moved into our homes.
Latekros Kihil is a mother displaced from Kombolcha in the Amhara region. She says she was forced to leave her home of many years because Amhara forces would go house to house, threatening Tigrayans.
It might be normal to sharpen a knife to kill an animal, but a human being? No, that's unimaginable. They would come to our homes and say junta should leave our land. We suffered a lot.
An 8 months long siege that has hindered the delivery of much needed aid and deliberately targeting and destruction of food items in the region has compounded to create a humanitarian catastrophe of unspeakable proportions, with over 6.5 million people said to be in urgent need of humanitarian assistance.
The 16-month-long conflict in Tigray has forced thousands of Tigrayans to leave their homes behind and have been forced to be sheltered in IDP camps in one of the worst living conditions imaginable. Our reporters visited Jazeera Samatat school in Ma'ala to talk to IDPs on their living conditions and the unbearable impacts of the ongoing siege. Abil Tsigabu has more.
The all-encompassing siege on Tigray has resulted in a devastating impact on internally displaced persons who were forced to depend on humanitarian assistance to satisfy their basic needs. However, the blockade on humanitarian aid in particular has made the entrance of aid into Tigray impossible and has led to the depletion of food and medical supplies. We visited Jazeera Samatat school in Ma'ala that was repurposed into an IDP camp as a result of the war on Tigray. Abraham is one of the IDPs sheltered in the school who remembers the cruelty of the Eritrean troops and Amhara militias as follows.
They burned our crop in our presence. They told us that the land itself doesn't belong to us. They said we can't cultivate the land any longer and that we should leave our homes. Then at night, they took us to the jungle. They went on beating the men with machetes all night long. They even took 3,000 birr from me. They took everything we had and loaded it on their vehicles. There were also 14-year-old children with us, whom the Eritrean forces took, claiming that they will join the Tigrayan forces.
Work on transportation with his motorbike. He's from Humera. He fled after hearing that the Eritrean forces are killing youths. I've never heard from him ever since that day. The Eritrean and Amhara forces killed so many people and threw them into Takaza River. We have nothing here. They took all our property and everything we've ever owned. We don't even have a single spoon in here.
The IDPs added that even though they were getting help from Ma'ala residents for months, they now have found themselves in hunger as those who had been helping them started to run out of food due to the siege.
There's nothing we're provided with up until this day. Only the residents of Ma'ala were there to help us. Now they can't even feed themselves. Everybody in Tigray is in trouble.
Look at this child. Do you think he could understand if I told him that we are under siege? He couldn't possibly. We escaped all the brutality, but we are going to die of hunger in here.
It is to be recalled that Tigray External Affairs Office stated that no aid trucks have entered Tigray since December.
That was Abil Tsigabu's report read by Wintakidana. Proceeding to the next news. One of the most gruesome aspects of the ongoing siege has been the discontinuation of banking services. For more than 8 months now, Tigrayans have not been able to access their savings, putting millions in crises. Pensioners are one amongst those highly affected by the ongoing siege, with many being forced to the brink. Kibrom Moldaburhan has more.
Numerous number of pensioners who are residents of Magada say that they used to feed their families with the income that they earned from their pension. However, now they couldn't feed themselves and their family, and they are at the brink of death just because the Ethiopian government terminated their legal payment.
The Ethiopian government is paying a benefit bond to foreigners, but it has deprived me of my pension salary. Though I am a citizen of this country, I am being racially discriminated. I have been in a very difficult situation for the past 9 months because I was deprived of my pension. After having served my country for 42 years and saved a percentage of my monthly salaries for the purpose of Social Security, I'm a widower who shoulders the responsibility of feeding 6 children, and now I'm starving to death.
Some pensioners have nearly 10 children to feed, some 5 and some 3. There's no pensioner without a child to take care of. For some of them, their nieces or nephews may live with them. We are starving, and we are in a desperate need of help.
ናይ ጥሮታ ኣበል ወላ ወደ ዓዲ خلي ዓዲ ትኮይኑ ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ እንተገልጊሉ ናፍታ ዓዱ ይላእኸሉ እዩ
Let alone us, the citizens of this nation, foreigners who used to serve this country have the right to get their pension. Thus, their money is wired to their respective homelands. Yet, the Ethiopian government is depriving us of our pension salaries. By doing so, is violating national and international laws.
We are denied access to our pensions because they intend to wipe us out of the face of the earth.
The pensioners also say that the Ethiopian government is deliberately acting against the convictions of international labor laws aiming to exterminate Tigrayans in genocide.
A number of retirees have died due to starvation, and there are many more who are bedridden, some with chronic illnesses like hypertension. Others are HIV/AIDS positive, and some of them are dying due to severe traumatic stress they have been through.
Genocide ይፈጸመሎ
Deprivation of one's pension is a lucid act of genocide.
Pensioners urge that the international community should take a decisive action to resolve the danger that the Tigrayan people have fallen captive to because of the Ethiopian government.
ዝምልከቶም ዓለም ለኸ ይኾኑ ናብ ውሽጢ ዓዲ ይኾኑ
To whomever this may concern, national or international, something must be done to put an end to this catastrophe.
بحصر ጊዜሲ ተለይሞትና ንቕልና አይና ነና
International organizations must help us as soon as possible. We are dying in here. Many people have died as the starvation worsened.
ዓለም ናይ ዓለም ሰብኣዊ መሰል ተጣበቕቲ ኢና ዝብላ
The countries that believe in standing for human rights of any human being have to do something about this. Nothing tangible has been done to help us, even though we have been in this situation for more than 17 months. We see the world deeply concerned about Ukraine, but not us Tigrayans.
Siyum Asgadom, an official for the Agency of Social Security, said that more than 75,000 pensioners are in dire situation because their pension salaries have been terminated and that it is a crime against humanity.
There are more than 75,000 pensioners in Tigray, and they have been in desperate situation for the past 9 months. Most of them are too old, disabled, and some of them living with chronic illnesses. So many of them are dying, and many more are suffering from various diseases.
For over 8 months now, essential items such as food, medical supplies, and fuel have been blocked from coming into Tigray, not to mention a deliberate blockade on essential services such as telecommunication and banking that have had an immeasurable impact on the living conditions of ordinary Tigrayans. We spoke with the residents of Ma'ala who say lack of transportation services in the capital has made it difficult for them to earn a living. Amanil Amar has a report.
The blockade on essential items and services such as fuel, telecommunication and banking has had an immeasurable impact on the living condition of ordinary Tigrayans across the state. Lack of fuel has led to millions lacking access to transportation, making it difficult for aid agencies to distribute aid, ambulance to reach the many in need of medical assistance, and even the capability of Tigrayans to reach their place of work.
Because we have to walk now, what used to take just 15 minutes now takes over 1 hour and a half.
When people close their businesses at 2 or 3 p.m. so that they can make it home in time, that's difficult. We have to close our business early now because we have to walk on foot to get back home.
The residents also say the compounded impacts on the 8 months long siege on the region have several immeasurable impacts on members of the community.
It's not just the lack of transportation, it's even difficult for some people to move because they are going hungry.
Many people are going to far parts of the city on foot. Among them, there are mothers, children, and pregnant women. It's difficult.
Lack of fuel has played a major role in exacerbating the humanitarian catastrophe on the ground, with aid agencies across the state being forced to halt humanitarian operations, as over 6.5 million people are said to be in need of urgent humanitarian assistance.
انتظرونا قريبا على قناة تلفزيون تيغراي باللغة العربية.
وهنا سنطرح تاريخ وحضارة وأيضا صوت شعب تيغراي من شرقها إلى غربها ومن شمالها إلى جنوبها.
من هي تيغراي؟
تيغراي أرض الحبشة ومنبع تاريخ أفريقيا. وتيغراي بوابة أو مدخل الديانة المسيحية والإسلامية في أفريقيا. ولا ننسى بأن تيغراي هي من استضافة الصحابة في عهد الملك النجاشي. تيغراي غنية بتاريخها وحضاراتها العريقة، فكانت مملكة أكسوم فيما مضى من أعظم الممالك في العالم.
ومن هو شعب تيغراي؟
فأما شعب تيغراي شعب مثقف ومتدين، والذي واجه ويمر بالكثير من التحديات ولا يزال صامدا رغم كل الصعوبات.
وماذا تريد تيغراي؟
تيغراي تريد السلام والمحبة والأخوة، لا أكثر ولا أقل.
إذن كل هذا وأكثر في برنامجنا الذي سيحتوي على أخبار حصرية تاريخية سياسية واقتصادية،
وأيضا لقاءات ووثائقيات هنا في قناة تيغراي باللغة العربية،
من الشعب وإلى الشعب.
وتابعونا على التردد التالي: القمر الصناعي ياهسات 52.5 درجة شرق، تردد 11.843، الاستقطاب تلقائي، معدل الرمز 27500.
To present the official release or briefing of the human and material damage happened on Tigray's education and educational system. So to start with, as you know, the fascist and invading forces, meaning the Abiy Ahmed-led Ethiopian forces, Isaias Afwerki-led Eritrean forces, and the Chauvinist-led Amhara forces like Amhara Militia, Amhara Special Forces, and the Amhara Fano, declared a genocidal war in consortium and indeed committed genocide on the people of Tigray. Among their genocidal targets, education and educational infrastructure were the top focuses of these invading and fascist forces. This is not a simple accusation or allegation on them. They themselves spilled the beans on how they objectively planned and destroyed Tigrayan infrastructure, and Abubau Tadessa's speech was exemplary for this. One of the military commanders of the Ethiopian regime. They also targeted human and historical educational capacities of Tigray. They are well aware of damaging education as best instrument to eliminate people in both short and long term. And they did it on our people. They killed our people. And among the killed, members of educational society, like students, teachers, and educational leaders and assisting staffs, were the worst. Female students, teachers, and staffs of the educational system are victims of the brutal sexual violence and killings. Whatever happened to female Tigrayans happened to female educational society members of Tigray. What happened to our people and to our educational system is beyond what we managed to explain, actually. What we are going to present here is limited to direct material and life casualties. To mention the participants in this study, NGOs which are members of education cluster under ECC, Education Coordination Center, meaning Tigray Teachers Association was part, volunteer Tagaru scholars and other dedicated contributors, and Bureau of Education taking the role of coordination. And this is an opportunity for me to thank all the participants in this study for educational casualties. The methodology we used is basically based on primary sources of information. We used questionnaires, interviews, images and video records, and in fact, on-field observations. Finally, the combined informations were analyzed and recorded using ICT system, which is now ready to anyone authorized to use the data from Bureau of Education. This study has got its own limitations like any study. Among the limitations, this data shall be known that it is limited to September 2014. We analyzed this report based on the data up to September 2021 in the European calendar, actually. So damages happened after that are not entertained, so they need separate study. And it also excludes Western zone because it's not accessible because it is under the invaders' administration. In fact, few areas under Eritrean forces and certain areas under security threats, which are situated around the borders of Amhara and the lakes, and some of them which we couldn't manage to get information after we studied. We couldn't get the feedback from a few of the areas because of the highest limitation in communication, because we don't have fuel after some time. And it actually excludes governmental and non-governmental higher education institutions and TVET. TVETs may study separately their own, and the higher educations the same, and private higher education institutions the same. So we don't include them. Again, this report do not address, though it is obvious as an implied effect, but we don't address the socio-economic implications, the psychosocial implications, and even the monetary estimations are not addressed. All the repercussions after the damage are expected to be studied using professionals and dedicated institutions separately. Here, I want to stress that this is a first-level draft report in terms of coverage and time, space coverage and time coverage, because of the reasons I mentioned earlier. So it needs revisiting, again studying and revitalizing the report to include the latest casualties happened in the education and educational system of Tigray. Regarding coverage of the study, it covers 6 zones: the South Zone, Southeast, Maqala, Eastern Zone, Central Zone, and Northwest Zone. We tried to assess 2,054 schools under the mentioned accessible zones, and among the accessible areas, 91.3% of them are included in this report. The ones which are not included are left because of many things I mentioned earlier, including the communication problems. And we also covered 2 educational colleges, Adwa and Abi Adi Education College. Before I directly pass to the immediate damages reported here, it's good to see the status of the educational system in Tigray during 2020. During 2020, we had governmental and non-governmental schools, primary schools, 2,221, and 271 secondary schools, 2 teachers' colleges, and we had enrolled students amount to 1,464,385 with gender parity index 0.99. Almost half of the population of the students were the gender parity between female and male. Number of teachers and educational leadership we had during 2020 was 46,598. According to estimations by Statistics Agency, Tigray could enroll 1.7 million students in this academic year, 2021-2022, had things went normal. No aggression, no other problems. But we obviously know aggressors happened, aggressors aggressed us and practiced many problematic issues which amount to genocide. And we had